Welcome back to Santarogo Surplus. This is part 3 of the SKS DMR video. We've got this much done so far. We are going to work on putting the cheese grater on, if you've never done that before. Went ahead and took this off and did a touch-up blue. I don't know if you remember from the previous video, but this was kind of grayed out and very worn, so now it looks much more appropriate. The cheese grater handguard is going to fit just like normal. The only thing is it usually has an extra piece here. That extra piece is just a spring clip, which you put in here close to where you're going to be putting the end cap on. Very simple. You just get this in here on that location. Your end cap on. You've got holes here for your new rivet. You want to match those holes up. With the holes lined up, you take your pin, you get it started. The holes almost never match up on the back. You got to push this in a little bit. There you go. Now it's all lined up. You need to crush this pin into a rivet head on this side. I usually use a vise to do that. There's any number of ways you can do it. If you get it on a bench block, you can pin it over with a hammer or using a flat punch, and it'll work just fine. I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'll be right back. And with the aluminum rivet pinned, you're going to want to reassemble. This is probably going to be very tight at first because the rivet is going to be not completely flat, but it is aluminum and it will go ahead and squish in. Don't forget to put your piston back in. Pretty tight, but it's in there. Work its way down, and you're locked. Everything should be fully functional at this point in time. And you have a cheese grater. I would not normally go for the cheese grater. I don't think they're quite as nice looking on an SKS as they are on an AK, but for a build like this, I think it really does actually work out pretty well. And now we're going to do a headspace check. That requires headspace gauges. This is a set of climbers 762 by 39. It's a go no-go set. If you don't have one and you don't want to spend the money on one, you can find a gunsmith who will do a headspace check for you. Headspace check and adjustment on SKS rifles is not something that I think the average correspondence course gunsmith is going to be really comfortable with, but hopefully you know a good one. This is a go. Okay. Now, one of the things that I did off camera was finish cleaning the cosmoline out. There was the barrel was full. Okay, you could not actually go through the barrel. I got a 20-inch worm of cosmoline out of it when I ran a brush through the barrel. Well, a patch through the barrel, and I cleaned out the chamber several times using a lot of WD-40, a lot of extra patches, and a 410 brush on a drill. I just put it into I put it on the rod, and then I put it into a drill, cordless drill. That kind of helps get everything loose. So make sure your chamber is very clean for this process. We have just the bolt in here. And I'm going to tell you I cheated a little bit. I actually have 2 bolts, so one of them worked without any effort and the other one would have had to be filed a little bit. So ideally you would do this without the extractor in, but there's no way to actually get everything to stay together like that. And you have a firm extractor or ejector rod here. So you can just go ahead and pop it in the chamber, get the bolt over it, and then you're in position. Okay? Let's go ahead and start this without the gauge. When you slide the bolt forward, it comes to the top and it locks. It falls into a locking position. Okay? And then it can't move. And then when it comes back up, it moves. Tilting bolt design. Okay, very simple, and it should just pretty much fall in there with nothing in. Okay, once you push it forward, you should have to lift it up to get it to go back. This is our go gauge, and get it on there. What you want to do is see if the bolt will come down and lock. Okay, it tilts down, it locks, comes back, tilts down, locks. That's good. Okay, that means that it's not so short or out of spec that you can't lock the bolt. Then you take the no-go, N-O-G-O gauge. So with this hooked into the extractor, you're going to push it forward, okay? And you're going to see if you can get it to lock. And it's not locking. So we're good on no-go gauge. On a lot of these, you'll get really close to locking. You'll feel a little bit of rub at the end. And that's okay, usually. You would need a field gauge to triple check how far you have to go with that. A field gauge is a little bit longer than a no-go gauge and gives you your maximum safe headspace. This is within spec for a new rifle, so that's very good. It passes the go and the no-go, so I'm very happy with that. If it didn't pass, you'd have to take a look at things like re-headspacing the barrel, or trying a different barrel, trying a different bolt. There's combinations. You can do some light filing sometimes if it's off by just a tiny hair. Okay, a little bit of filing on the with the extractor off on the and the firing pin out on the pocket, but you really don't want to take off more than a couple of 10,000ths on that. It's more a matter of like stoning it. I've had one case where I had to take the locking block and the rear of the bolt and file this. This is your locking shelf right here, and stone that a little bit, and that actually got things to go into place, and it fires very well. On a barrel like this, honestly, the easiest thing to do if you have a press would be to pop the pin out. Okay, get your headspace adjusted, and then ream the hole a tiny, very tiny bit larger, and get a different pin in. Okay, you can't go very much larger. You don't have a lot of room on this to go larger because it's not the size of the journal, the barrel journal of an AK. So you don't have a lot of space to mess with that. But it is possible to re-headspace a barrel using a slightly larger pin, because you're probably only off by a hair. Okay, we're talking about reaming instead of actually drilling something out. That's it. We have a headspace check. Let's move on to the next part. And the next part of the SKS assembly project is a 4-day-old golden retriever puppy. Look at that. Look at that little face. We just had a litter, so everyone enjoy the puppies. You're going to see a lot more of them over the next couple months. So as I mentioned to start with, we're going to try to use this receiver cover as a fixed optics mount and see if it works very well. Now, if you look at it, you can hear it actually. That's how loose it is with no spring tension. Okay? Up and down movement is pretty significant. Back and forth movement is less significant, but still there. When you put the recoil spring in, it holds it, returns it back to a place, but you've still got that much up and down movement, and you've still got the same amount of lateral or forward and back movement and lateral movement. Okay? So it doesn't really help a whole lot. This is not a particularly tight fit either, which doesn't help. The idea behind these set screws is that once you get them put on, it will keep things from shifting. Unfortunately, I don't really trust the way these are made. So they're perfectly flat. There's no point on them. And I could chuck them in the lathe and put a point on them, and then they would put a depression in. That would be a really good way to handle it. But these are very rough screws, and I decided to go ahead and get some actual set screws, which are hardened. This is an M6 1.0 thread, which most of these that I've seen are going to be. There's a couple I've seen that are M5, and they're all different. Some of them come with real set screws, hex head set screws, some of them don't. These, the flathead really messed up. I mean, this is just a messed up screw. It's just what it came with. Never seen it that way before. It's going to take a minute to get the nuts off because these screws are pretty messed up. The purpose of these nuts is actually to keep the set screws from backing out or shifting around. They are literally lock nuts. So if you get this set and you tighten this down with a wrench, you can't, it won't shift on you, okay? That does mean that for a full field strip you need to have a wrench and a hex key. So this is one of the reasons I'm not necessarily attached to the system. I want to see how well it's going to work for your benefit, because these scope mounts are floating around everywhere and they're not, they have the potential to be pretty accurate. I'm going to get them all on. I'm not going to get them tightened down right now. I want to put the recoil spring back in, and then we'll have the whole thing assembled under tension, and at that point I will tighten these down as much as I can, and we'll get some receiver marks, and then I can decide if I want to center punch that or not. More valuable SKS, if I had a matching bolt and magazine or something, I would probably not do this, because this is going to, no matter what you do, this is going to leave marks on the receiver. But this isn't that kind of SKS, so I'm just not worried about it. Another way to deal with this would be to have a couple of set screws on the back, a welded tab on the back with a couple of set screws to hold the thing in tension at the back. That would probably help with the accuracy potential a lot. We're going to get these just barely tight, and then we'll start tightening them a little bit at a time. If you tighten all one side and not the other, you're going to pull the dust cover, the receiver cover, off axis. You do have to make sure that your lock nuts are staying loose. There we go. Nice and tight. This should be either an 8 or 10 millimeter wrench if you want to carry a field kit. It's actually not that hard to do. It's just that it does require a tool at this point. Those are nice and tight. When I put the mount back on, we will see what I do about Loctiting them and see how sturdy it actually is with the rings. This is just about ready to go now. Next step is going to be to decide. I think I'm going to go ahead and leave this on for right now. I will probably get rid of the bayonet mount. It's kind of, it's one of those things that just catches on stuff if you have it there. Leaving the cleaning rod attachment points in place is probably a good idea, since we're trying to do a military style what if DMR build. So I will probably have a cleaning rod. I think a sectional cleaning rod is a better idea, but I don't know what kind of practical accuracy we're going to get out of this. We're just probably going to have to iterate through and see if this changes when we do take this off. So our next step is going to be to start looking at the stock and seeing what modifications, sanding, or adjustments we have to make to it. So part 3 of the video is done. Little Deputy Red here, I would like to tell you to subscribe, like, share, and consider doing a donation on Patreon. We'll see you in part 4 in a little bit.